With the development of improved and reliable jet engines, aviation entered a new age. Jet-powered fighters already saw service during the Second World War and showed superior performance over standard piston-powered aircraft. The US was one nation that quickly started on the development path of jet-powered fighters, leading to the creation of the North American F-86 Sabre, one of the most iconic fighter aircraft in aviation history. In the closing stages of the war in the Pacific, the US Navy was making plans to acquire jet-powered carrier-based aircraft that could be pressed into service in time for the planned invasion of Japan in 1946. The US Army Air Force also showed interest in this project and asked for its own version, known as the XP-86, developed by the North American Aviation Company. On the 28th of February 1946, the mock-up of the swept-winged XP-86 was inspected and approved. The Air Force was so confident of the future performance of the XP-86 that, on the 20th of November 1946, it gave the green light for the production of 33 aircraft designated P-86A. This aircraft was outwardly quite similar to the XP-86, with external changes being very slight. The P-86A flew for the first time on the 20th of May 1948. In June, the P-86 was redesignated F-86, when the P for Pursuit category was replaced by F for Fighter. By March 1949, the last of the 33 aircraft were completed and delivered. These were mainly used for testing and evaluation, and none actually entered squadron service. A second production order of 188 aircraft was issued in February 1949. Deliveries began in March of 1949 and were completed in September of 1949. A contract for 333 additional F-86As were received on the 29th of May 1948, and the final contract was approved on the 23rd of February 1949. Interestingly enough, the Army Air Force had so much confidence in this new aircraft that it was chosen to try to break the world airspeed record. To get the maximum impact, the Air Force decided to make the attempt in full view of the public before a crowd of 80,000 spectators at the 1948 National Air Races in Cleveland, Ohio. The pilot during this high-speed attempt was Major Robert L. Johnson. On the 5th of September 1948, Major Johnson flew his F-86A on only 3 out of 6 planned flights due to bad weather. Even though the average of the 3 runs that were timed was 1,078 km per hour, the record was not recognized. Eventually, the goal would be achieved 10 days later with a record of 1,080 km per hour. The first Air Force unit to receive this new aircraft was the 94th Squadron, which was part of the 1st Fighter Group. It was followed by the 27th and 71st Squadrons, and by the end of May 1949, they had 83 F-86As in total. The next units to receive the F-86 were the 4th Fighter Group, charged with the defense of Washington, D.C., and then the 81st Fighter Group, charged with the defense of nuclear bomb facilities at Alamogordo, New Mexico. In February of 1949, there was a contest held by the 1st Fighter Group to choose a name for the new fighter. Sabre was selected and was made official on the 4th of March 1949. The F-86A inherited many aspects of the XP-86 prototype's overall design. The most important difference between the F-86A and the XP-86 was the introduction of the General Electric J47-GE1 engine. The cockpit of the F-86A remained almost the same as that of the XP-86, although certain military equipment was provided to increase its combat effectiveness, as well as a Type 4E1 ejection seat with a manually jettisoned canopy. In the autumn of 1948, problems with the J47GE1 engine in the early F-86As forced a momentary halt to F-86 production. It was followed by the use of a few J47GE3s, and in December, the J47GE7 became available and full production resumed. The P-86A was equipped with 6 12.7mm machine guns in the nose, 3 on each side of the pilot's cockpit. Each gun was fed by an ammunition canister in the lower fuselage, holding up to 300 rounds of ammunition. The P-86A had 2 underwing hardpoints for weapons, and they could carry a pair of 783-litre drop tanks. Ground attack weapons could be installed in place of a jettisonable underwing fuel tanks, including a pair of 45kg, 227kg, or 454kg bombs, as well as 340kg napalm tanks or 227kg fragmentation clusters. Alternatively, 8 removable zero-rail rocket launchers could be installed, carrying 16 5-inch rockets. When external armament was fitted in place of the job tanks, the combat radius was reduced from 530 to 80 kilometers. All earlier F-86As had been equipped at the factory with Sperry Mark 18 optical lead computing gun sight, which was quite similar to the type of gun sight used on American fighter aircraft in the latter parts of World War II. This was replaced by the A1B GBR sight and AN APG-5C ranging radar, which was designed to automatically measure the range and calculate the appropriate lead before the guns were fired, relieving the pilot of the cumbersome task of having to manually adjust an optical sight in order to determine the range to the target. When activated, the system automatically locked onto and tracked the target, and could be used for rocket or bomb aiming as well as for the guns. The internal fuel capacity of the F-86A was 1,647 litres, carried in 4 self-sealing tanks. 2 of the tanks were in the lower part of the fuselage, one of them being wrapped around the intake duct just ahead of the engine, and the other being wrapped around the engine itself. The other 2 fuel tanks were in the wing roots. The initial skirmishes with MiGs in Korea had demonstrated that their pilots lacked experience and an aggressive approach. Despite this, the MiG threat was very real and threw the US Air Force into near panic, as there was nothing in Korea that could provide an effective counter. In order to eliminate the MiG threat, the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing, equipped with the F-86A, was ordered to Korea. Most of their pilots were seasoned veterans of World War II, and they had shot down many German aircraft during that conflict. However, before any of these Sabres could reach the front, on the 26th of November 1950, Chinese units intervened with devastating force in Korea, breaking through the UN lines and throwing them back into utter confusion. The inexperienced and poorly trained MiG pilots did not provide any support for this counterattack. The first F-86As arrived at Kimpo Airfield, south of Seoul, on the 15th of December. 2 days later, they were dispatched on an armed reconnaissance mission. Lieutenant Colonel Bruce H. Hinton, commander of the 336th Squadron, succeeded in shooting down 1 MiG-15 out of a flight of 4, scoring first blood for the Sabre. On the 22nd of December, the MiGs managed to shoot down a single Sabre out of a flight of 8 without loss to themselves, but later that day, the Sabres got their revenge by destroying 6 MiGs out of a flight of 15. This loss spooked the MiG pilots, and they avoided combat for the rest of the month. During December, the 4th Wing had flown 234 sorties, clashed with the enemy 76 times, scored 8 victories, and lost 1 aircraft. By the end of 1950, Chinese armies had driven UN forces out of North Korea and had begun to invade the south. In an attempt to hold the enemy advance, the F-86A was used for ground attack operations, but these proved unsuccessful. When carrying underwing ordnance, the F-86A's range and endurance were much too low, and it could not carry a sufficiently large offensive load to make it a really effective fighter-bomber. Eventually, the Chinese advance ground to a halt due to overextended supply lines and the relentless UN air attacks. In early March, the MiGs began to become more active, but the F-86s were not idle either. The strip of airspace in Western Korea, just south of the Yalu, soon became known as MiG Alley to the Sabre pilots. The Sabres would arrive for their 25-minute patrols in 5-minute intervals. The MiGs would usually cruise back and forth at high altitudes on the other side of the Yalu within Chinese airspace, looking for an opportune time to intervene. Very often, they would remain on the north side of the river, tantalizingly out of reach. When the MiGs did choose to enter battle, the Sabres would usually have only a fleeting chance to fire at the enemy before the MiGs broke off and escaped back across the Yalu, and the MiGs had the advantage of being able to choose the time and place of the battle. The MiG-15 had better high-altitude performance, higher combat ceiling, a higher climb rate, and was faster at higher altitudes than the F-86A. This superior high-altitude performance enabled the MiG to break off from combat at will. Despite these handicaps, the F-86A pilots were far more experienced than their Chinese opponents, and they were better marksmen. The Sabre was a more stable gun platform and had fewer high-speed instabilities than the MiG-15. In addition, the F-86A was faster than the MiG-15 at lower altitudes, and an effective strategy was for the Sabre to force the battle down to lower altitudes, where it had the advantage. In April of 1951, the MiGs got a little bolder, and they would often make attempts to intercept B-29 formations that were attacking targets in North Korea. The biggest air battle of that spring took place on the 12th of April, when a formation of 39 B-29s, escorted by F-84Es and F-86As, was attacked by over 70 MiGs. 3 B-29s were lost, whereas 14 MiGs were claimed destroyed, 4 by the escorting Sabres, and 10 by B-29 gunners. No F-86As were lost in action during the first 5 months of 1951, and they flew 3,550 sorties while scoring 22 victories. Most of the attrition was caused by accidents rather than by losses in actual combat. As the first year of the Korean War came to an end, it was apparent that the Sabre had been instrumental in frustrating the MiG-15's bid for air superiority. Without control of the air, the Chinese were unable to establish their series of air bases, and they were not able to carry out effective air support for their spring offensive, and the Korean War settled down to a stalemate on the ground. The more advanced F-86E began to enter action in Korea with the 4th Wing in July of 1951, replacing the unit's F-86As on a 1-by-1 basis. The conversion to the F-86E was rather slow, and the last F-86A was not replaced until July 1952. This concludes our look at the F-86As. What do you think about this early US jet fighter? Was it a match for the MiG-15, or was it just pilot skills that kept them in the fight? Let us know in the comments. If you like what we do and want to see more, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single video. Also, don't forget to take a look at our extensive collection of articles on our website, plane-encyclopedia.com. Thank you.